Hey there, welcome back to my channel, and in this video we're going to continue building our first Aiogram bot, and we're going to dive into the very basic concepts of our Aiogram library. So to get started, first of all, I would like to open the Aiogram documentation. So this is the documentation that you can find about Aiogram. The current stable version is 3.22. So you can find all the necessary information about building block here. You can also refer to Telegram bot API, but we more commonly use the Aiogram official documentation because we directly work with the Aiogram and we don't actually work with the Telegram bot API directly. Like most of the time we just work with Aiogram API, so no need to bother about Telegram bot API for now. So you can see here there is a bot API. You can see there are lots of different objects or instances and different libraries that they use. They use Async, so HTTP. This is the asynchronous client for making HTTP connections. We're going to talk about this more details in the third chapter of this series. So what do we have here? We have different available types. So if you need to find information about different types of messages, you can refer to this section, like different audio, background effects, bot command scope, bot command, blah blah blah. There are lots of different things here, different chats. Don't be overwhelmed. There are lots of things, but most of the time you just need the basics. And if you don't know something, you can always refer to documentation just to make sure that you are doing the right thing. And the documentation serves as a single source of truth. It is completely normal to make mistakes, so don't get overwhelmed. Just be familiar with this documentation, what it has, like different methods here. You can find methods like attaching different stickers, different other valuable methods, like create the forum topic, delete the business messages. There are lots of things here, tons of things here, numerous of different things. Enormous amount of information, so don't bother about that. And the second thing I would like to show you, this is my GitHub repository that I have created specifically for this series. You can find the lesson 1. I've already pushed this lesson actually, so you can find the very basic lesson setup, and that's all you have to know about this project structure. It's all in readme.md. So, but if you have any questions or if you notice any kind of issues with that, feel free to just direct message me on Discord, or feel free to drop a comment in the comment section below. I will make sure to fix that, and I'll do to the best of my ability to fix that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Let's get started with our first bot. So what do we need to get started with our first bot? The very first thing is that we need to create this bot. And to do that, we have to open the BotFather. As you can see, the 3 millions of monthly users, this is the official bot library, so you have to make sure you use the official BotFather. Here's its username. You need to start this bot. And here you can see my bots. There are lots of different bots. This is the list of all your bots created in Telegram. And you can also create a new bot. And in order to create a new bot, you can probably use a new bot command. And then you just need to give it a name. So which kind of name can we give it? For example, the test YouTube, something like that. And now we have to think of the unique name for that, which is used to search and find this particular bot. So in order to find this, so this is like a unique identifier of your bot. Let's say this is going to be YouTube test YouTube Aiogram 3 bot. I'm not sure if that's created or not. It looks like it is. And now this is the important part. You get this token, which is the token to connect to your bot. Keep it very secure and store it safely, because it can be used by anyone to control your bot. So you don't have to disclose this information. Of course, I'm disclosing that right now because I'm just showing you the context of this tutorial, how to build those kind of bots. You don't have to share this token with anyone, no matter what. So let's get back to our Visual Studio Code. This is a completely clean, new, empty project. And here in this project, I'm going to start with creating a touch-env file. In this touch-env file, I'm going to place the following string, bot token, and this is our token. So this is the very basic file you have to create. Keep this file secure. Never push this environment file to any kind of remote repositories, and never share those credentials with anyone. You always have to use authorized secrets managers like AWS Secrets Manager, or in case of Google clients, you can use their own secrets manager, or if you rely on GitHub Actions, you can use GitHub Secrets or GitHub environments and then follow GitHub Secrets, but never share this information in public repo. And the second thing I'm going to create here is the main.py. Main.py is the entry point to our code. For now, let's leave it empty, because we first need to set up and configure the environment of our project. So what do we need first? First, we need to create a virtual environment. How to do that? Well, for this purpose, there is a special utility called venv. Venv is the utility which controls, let me actually scale in a little bit so you could see what I'm just typing here. So this is the utility which controls the virtual environments in your machine, and that lets you isolate the project dependencies between different projects. That's why it is so important. And so I'm going to type the command Python 3. Make sure you have pre-installed the Python, hopefully you did, -m venv.venv. .venv is just the name of the folder that you are going to use to store your Python packages. Here we go, you can see the lib. with all the packages and all the side packages and setup tools which are necessary to run your project. So this is the heart of your project. And then you have to activate this virtual environment to let your project understand which kind of dependencies you have. So for this purpose, if you are using a Mac, you have to use source venv bin activate. But if you are using a Windows machine or something else, you probably have to use a different command. I'm not exactly sure which one it is, so it's probably a good idea to go and check it. Well, ChatGPT could definitely help with that. Once you have finished setting up your project environment, the next good idea just to follow to the official Aiogram documentation to the installation tab. Here you can see pip install -u Aiogram. -u refers to the latest version of Aiogram. This is why it is so important to keep it. Now I'm going back to the Visual Studio Code and I'm going to install this library. You may have installed Python packages into your global environment, which can cause conflicts, but no, I have not installed them to my global library, but it looks like the Visual Studio Code did not interpret my environment. And if you have the similar problem, all you have to do is just open the settings, Shift-Command-P, and select the proper interpreter. Here you need to select the interpreter. And here it is. As you can see, we are using the global reference to the global virtual environment. We're not actually using this environment, but it refers to that one. That's a common issue with a Visual Studio Code, and I hate it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going just to copy-paste the path to this virtual machine, and I'm gonna enter the interpreter path. Here we go. And it just sets up the Python environments here, and now that should be working properly. Let me just type the following command, pip list. This command will list all the dependencies that we have in the context of this virtual environment. And here's the most interesting part. What will happen if we deactivate this environment? Let's try to deactivate it and try to pip list again. Now you can see there is no such a command like pip. But if we try pip3, sometimes it is pre-installed on Mac machines, we can see there is nothing like Aiogram. This is a very common and best way to make sure that your project is consistent and it has all its dependencies within the virtual environment. Now let's activate the virtual environment again. I have activated the virtual environment. Now that I have installed Aiogram library, we can finally get started with the actual code. Let's go to the main.py. And here I'm going to import a very necessary library such as async, logging, this is for logging purposes, and os. This library is necessary to communicate with our operation system. In this case, we needed to export environment variables into the context of execution of our code. I'm also going to import from Aiogram bot and dispatcher. And I'm going to speed up the next part of the video. And then once done, I will walk you through every change I made. And here we go. The only one crucial detail that I missed is that we don't have .env. .env is a library which is very cool. It helps us to load the environment variables into the context of our running program on fly. And if you'd like to install that, you just need to open python.env documentation, copy-paste this string here. And here we go. We have installed this version. Now it should be resolved. If it doesn't look like resolved, all you have to do is just open Shift-Command-P and reload the window. Here it is. Reload the window. Now this dependency seems to be resolved. All right, let me quickly explain you what is going on here. So we have imported Async. Async is a library which powers Aiogram in any kind of asynchronous application. We're going to talk about asynchronous stuff a little bit later. Now logging. Logging is necessary for making loggings, obviously. OS is necessary to communicate with our operation system. As you can see, we're using it to get our environment variable. The load.env is loading this environment variable into our running environment. And get environment takes this from the environment, but token env is just the name of our environment variable that we're using to search for environment variables in our environment. Handle start is the basic command which is used as the handler. It is the processor. It handles all the updates and performs specific logic. Sometimes a complex business logic is moved out of the handler and endpoint level to different parts of your application, different layers. But we're not considering this complex infrastructure here. I'm going to leave it for future videos. For now, we're going to keep all our business logic in the context of handlers. So they are processing our requests. This arrow, which points to none, essentially means that the return type of this handler is none. It is because our handler actually doesn't return anything. It just uses command await answer, which internally tells Telegram API that we have to return a message, "Hi, this is our first test," to the user. But the handler itself, as the computational unit of Python application, it doesn't have any return type. This function doesn't return anything. It just awaits for the response from Telegram API, and that's it. That's all it does. It doesn't return anything. The end of execution of this handler gets at that point when it reaches the end of this function. Once we get the token, we raise the runtime error, just to make sure that our program is not running without token. The bot is the instance which communicates with Telegram API. The dispatcher is the instance which handles all the requests. We have discussed that in our previous video. Dispatcher message register is like a way of saying, hey, here's the handler, let's register this with this command start. And command start is the basic filter. This is the filter which says, hey, if you receive the start command from user, let's go ahead and trigger handle start handler. That's all it does. And await dispatcher start polling. It's a bit complex, but here all we do is essentially saying, hey, indefinitely run polling to the Telegram API until any kind of error happens, or until the connection is disrupted. Let's just do that. Or until the process is terminated or killed manually. And the last part is that if name equals main basically says if our program is run manually using Python main command, it is the only way to start the script. For example, if you import this file main.py in another file, and then you try to run this module from another files, it is not going to work. So this is like a safeguard, and this is like a best practice of saying, hey, this is our entry point, this is where our program begins, so let's just keep it as the entry point. Let's avoid triggering it from any other modules. Let's keep it very straightforward, like this is our entry point, this is our program. And async run is the very basic command to start the asynchronous coroutine. And here it is. Main is the main coroutine. And what is the coroutine? Coroutine is a synchronous function. It is the object of a synchronous function. But what is the asynchronous function? What is the object of a synchronous function? Well, I'm not going to dive too deep into this because this is not the purpose of this series, this episode. But to put it very simply, let's imagine a situation where we have a very simple Telegram bot. Let's say this is our Telegram bot. I apologize in advance for my drawing skills. This is the first time I'm doing that. So this is our Telegram bot. And now let's imagine that we are getting requests from the Telegram API. So we have two possible requests. Here goes the first request. And after this, we're going to have a second request. Here we go. There are two requests, request 1 and request 2. And they're coming one after another. So what happens when the first request actually reaches our bot? It starts processing it. But what if this request requires access to the database? Let's say we have a database. This square represents a database. Once it starts processing the first request, it goes to the database. So let's imagine for a moment that our application is synchronous. This is the opposite to asynchronous. In this case, the first request is being handled and being processed. But meanwhile, it is being processed. The second request is forced to wait until the first request is processed. So it is waiting. And this is sometimes referred as head-of-the-line blocking. This is where all subsequent requests are waiting for the first one to be processed. So this is the very simple analogy how a relatively straightforward synchronous application works. But our library is asynchronous. So what happens in a synchronous case? In a synchronous case, once our first request is being processed and our Telegram bot makes requests to our database and awaiting the result from our database, it switches its context to processing the second request. And while it is processing the second request, we may get result back from the database. And once we get the result back from the database and finish processing the second request, then we switch back to processing the first request and respond it with something. So our code constantly switches attention, switches the context from one task to another. This is the example of asynchronous multitasking. There are other different types of multitasking, for example, parallel multitasking, but we're not considering that here. In this particular case, we are actually emulating the parallel processing. We're not processing them in parallel, but this is the emulation. Similar to when you are reading a book and someone approaches you and start asking questions. You have to switch your context between reading a book and answering his questions. This is a very similar analogy to how our asynchronous application works. It is worth pointing out that context switch is quite expensive, but because we use all single process and all our Python program, all asynchronous coroutines are working within the context of a single application, These context switches are not that expensive. It would be much more expensive to switch context between different processes. But in this case, our program may maintain hundreds or thousands of different connections, of different concurrent connections. And that's one of the real benefits of using asynchronous libraries, be it Fast API or Aiogram 3 in our case. So that's just a couple of words on how the asynchronous application works. So the next time you see the asynchronous main function, you will know that this function would asynchronously handle your request and provide more efficiency of work. And last but not least, let's export our dependencies to requirements file. In order to do that, you just need to use pip freeze, put the signs of inequality, and say requirements.txt. And now you can see all the project dependencies specified here. Why is that important? It is important because it lets us specify the very stable versions of dependencies we're using for this project. And if we later need to build or deploy this application in a cloud environment, for example, or in the hosting, our machine there in a hosting or our server there would be aware of the Python packages that we're using here in this project. That's why it is important to keep track of the Python packages versions. And that's why we're using requirements.txt. And now let's go ahead and try testing it. Let's start python main.py and our program starting. It starts polling. Probably the last thing I would like to explain here in the context of this video, what is the polling? It is when our bot constantly asking Telegram API for new updates. But I'm going to cover this in more detail in our next episode. But for now, let's just focus on testing that. Let's get back to our Telegram and let's open our bot and let's try to start command. And here it is. Here's our message. If we get back to our Visual Studio Code, we can see we have received a new update. It is handled, the duration of this update, and the ID of the user. And that's it for today's video. I really hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate that. If you have any thoughts or any issues or any comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. See you in the next one. Bye.